I hope we are alive now. We are alive now throughout the length and breadth of South Africa, as we have continuously said. These briefings, amongst others, are to update us on where we are in our fight against this coronavirus, where we are in the measures that we have put in place during this lockdown, with the sole purpose of saving lives of our people. Before we even start this briefing, we want again to appeal to all our people to adhere to the call made by the President for all of us to stay at home, so that all of us as a country will be able to defeat the devastating effects of the coronavirus that has ravaged many countries. We know that the death toll in the entire world now stands at 38,000 people who have died as a result of this disease. In our country, we all know that 3 people have now died as a result of this virus. This virus kills. We therefore appeal once again to all our people, kubo bonke abantu bakithi, ukuthi asihlaleni emakhaya njengoba umongameli esicelile, ngoba legciwane le-coronavirus liyabulala. Singadibani nabanye abantu, nalapho sikhona, lapho siyothenga khona ukudla, siqikelele ukuthi asikho eduzane nabanye abantu, at least sibe yimitha komunye umuntu, so that uma umuntu ekhuluma kungabi namathe akhe azokuthintela bese uthola legciwane. Futhi sithi noma sibulisana asiqhubeke singabambani ngezandla, ngoba legciwane litholakala ngokuthi sithintane. Having said that, I now have my colleagues here. Thank you, colleagues, for coming to this media briefing. We will first have an update by the Minister of Social Development on how we are doing as it relates to the grants payments throughout the length and breadth of our country. Minister Zulu.
Is it on? Lower it down a little bit. Lower it down a little bit. Is it on? Okay. Thank you very much, Minister Mthembu. Very good afternoon to everyone, and a particular good afternoon to the people at home, and good afternoon to our communities. Firstly, I'd like to sincerely thank those communities who yesterday stepped up to assist us as we were having the first day of the payment of the SASSA grants. I would like to also thank the retail sector, in particular those that had meetings with SASSA before the beginning of the payments of the SASSA grants. I would like to thank the entire SASSA staff, those who took their time and really spent their time out in the queues, at the post office, and everywhere where they could to assist the elderly, to assist the people with disability, to assist anyone out there who was wishing and willing to spend the time sitting in the queues to get their financial assistance, which is the SASSA grant. I also want to thank in particular the community workers who, without even being organized by government, they came out in their numbers to try and assist our communities to keep the distance, to try and assist the elderly in particular, even with assisting them with the groceries that they managed to buy yesterday. But I also do wish to thank you, media, who are here today, because I know many of you were out there with us yesterday. You ran around speaking to the SASSA grant recipients. You spoke to ourselves. You posed the necessary questions to us, and you needed answers as according to the plans that we had put in place to try and help the situation, so that when all is said and done, the majority of our social grant recipients get their grants. Yesterday, we started quite well from a point of view of ensuring that the SASSA grants are paid through the post office, through the banks, through every retail where they could either access their money or they wanted to buy their groceries. I must say that from the beginning in the morning, it started very smoothly, from accessing the money through the ATMs, that is the banks, through the retails. It started very well, save for the fact that, of course, the queues were very long, and the queues were very long outside of the areas of access for their money. The queues were very long, and the distances were not being kept, as we were hoping that people would appreciate and understand that they have to keep the distance. Today, when we went out, we found a very different situation where I think from yesterday's experience, the support that we needed to get in terms of the retail sectors assisting us, in terms of having more of our own out there assisting in the queues, I think in most of the areas of the country, things were looking very better. But of course, I cannot conclude that, because the social grant payments are still continuing as we speak, and the situation room is monitoring all the provinces, and hopefully by the end of the day, we would have received all the reports that we expect to get from the MECs in the provinces, the HODs, and the regional managers of SASSA. We are hoping that we're going to be getting a better report than what was happening yesterday. We do want to indicate to you that most of the payments which were supposed to be made, the access channels used by beneficiaries with SAPO and post office accounts, payments on the whole were largely successful despite some challenges in some areas. The total grant amount for social grants beneficiaries is approximately 10.2 billion. Beneficiaries access these funds mainly through the national payment system, including the ATMs and all that you saw yesterday. The numbers of transactions by beneficiaries using SAPO card stood at 4 million, and a total value of the transaction withdrawal purchases was 3.8 billion by 17 hours yesterday. So you can imagine the amount that had to be accessed only just yesterday, because unfortunately for us, irrespective of the fact that we requested that only the elderly and people with disability must go out, it did end up with many of those who were not in that category arriving and accessing the money. I do wish to thank the post office though, because as people were arriving, they were doing their best to make sure that they see that these are elderly people. The chairs were set out for them to sit. They were also putting them in smaller numbers into the post office, and also with the retailers, they were putting them in manageable batches into the retail shops to be able, for them to be able to purchase their necessities. Today, we also went to a few places in Pretoria in particular. I think experience of yesterday was improved, because when we visited some of the retailers, we found that they had improved the situation from yesterday. payments of beneficiaries using commercial banks. In addition to the 3.8 million beneficiaries who accessed their monies using SAPO card, there were 3.2 million beneficiaries whose grants were debited into their commercial accounts. Here is what I think we need to look into in the future to say, what is it that we can do to avoid the queues in general? Because now the queues are like this because of the current situation. But I think moving forward, here is an opportunity for us to look for better ways and improving our systems, because I personally believe that giving dignity to people is about ensuring that they easily access the benefits, the social grant in general, but also make it easy for them. At the moment, it's still a stress and strain for our people. And I think at this point, we are already having discussions with SAPO, with SASSA, to say, can we look for different ways of doing it? Because doing this today, it is a corona, tomorrow it might be something else, and it might find us not with good systems that are easily accessible. Some of the challenges that we faced yesterday was overcrowding, and long queues was the key challenge experienced across payments value chain, particularly in shopping malls and retail outlets. CSG beneficiaries also came in large numbers despite the call for dedicating 30th and the 31st to older persons. Social distancing was social distancing, compliance and application of hygiene guidelines required improvement. And we, by yesterday, when everything closed, we were now talking to the retailers, talking to the post office to say, can we, when we visit these places today, find it better than what it was yesterday? And I did see the difference. Late arrival of cash, particularly in some rural areas, and many of you will know that yesterday we were already talking about the fact that monies were not available, money ran out, and therefore we needed to have a quick plan of ensuring that by the time we start the day today, most of the monies had arrived. Beneficiaries obviously arrived very early in the morning to be in front of the queue. Money was available for all grant types, not just old age and disability grant beneficiaries, causing the problem. Because probably what we should have done, which we should look at into the future, is that when we say money must be available, those days that we are saying it should be available to the elderly and those with a disability, our system must speak to that, because that's why we had yesterday everybody just thinking this is an opportunity for them to come out, and not much could stop them from doing that. And what we think we might say is our key achievement was overall payment system was very stable, and the turnaround time for me was very good at the post office, because people were spending each person was spending less than 5 minutes or 10 minutes, less than 10 to 5 minutes at every attention. Minister of Transport, of course, relaxed the transport directive to allow public transportation of beneficiaries to collect the social grants. I'm aware, of course, that this morning some of the taxi drivers said they are sticking to what was said earlier on, and there was a little bit of a problem in terms of the transportation. But as we're coming through here, we're calling around to find out whether this was a problem in many places, and we're finding that they agreed to be taking them. In fact, we decided that if in case we have a greater problem, we must always have plan B with an alternative. But obviously the taxis and the taxi owners, because they had the conversation with the minister, we were hoping that they were not going to give us any challenges. Then yesterday we said to look at what is it that we needed to improve. SAPO and SASSA, together with the entire payment industry, including retailers and banks, had a teleconference meeting to reflect on day one challenges and review measures that were not working. The following interventions were implemented. Hopefully these interventions were implemented everywhere, because as you can appreciate, having a teleconference and then communicating to everyone across the country to make sure that these are implemented is another. And as I leave here, I actually have to go a little bit much early, because I've got to make sure that things on that score, things are being implemented. Cash management industry had confirmed through the South African Reserve Bank that there will be enough cash supplies across the country to replenish the ATMs to address yesterday's problem. City of Johannesburg had offered additional volunteers to support the queue management and retailers and ATMs in the greater Johannesburg area. And by the way, I found this also happening in Tshwane as I was in Tshwane today. And I also found that some of the NGOs that work within the communities and community-based organizations, they decided they were going to come out and be of assistance. NetJog and ProfJogs have been approached to avail additional personnel to support crowd management. And today, crowd management was not as bad as yesterday, because there were not so many people who flocked out. However, that bit of comfort doesn't make us feel comfortable, because tomorrow we start the normal schedule of grant payments. Dignity measures, number of chairs will be increased to improve the seating arrangements, because we felt that yesterday that there were not enough chairs because people came in such huge numbers. We asked also the retailers to also step up and assist us in ensuring that we get more chairs. The places I went to today, and also due to the fact that there were less people than they were yesterday, there was quite order, and there were more chairs and most people were sitting down. I'm talking about people who had gone out to get their social grants. I'm not talking about people that had gone out to buy from the shops, because those queues actually today were much longer. SAPO has ordered additional cash more than originally projected. We did indicate yesterday that we think that in our projection, we missed the point in the amount of money that we needed to make sure that we cover. Additional SASSA staff deployed at big SAPO branches and retailers serving high numbers. In Mpumalanga, measures have been put in place for SASSA staff who should have arrived at 6:30 to support the management, because remember, Mpumalanga was among the first actually to say that they were running out of money and people were worried that they were going to be going back home without the money. Finally, I do wish to pass our sincere condolences to the beneficiaries who passed on while they were either en route to receive their SASSA grant, or had just received the SASSA grant, or were sitting. In the Western Cape, we have one person, and we did not want necessarily to announce the names and all, because we do have the names, yes, but I think we need to be sensitive to their families and the plans that are being made. The person that died, he collapsed and died on his way home in KwaZulu-Natal. The person who passed on there collapsed at the post office. When the ambulance came, and ambulance came on time, I'm told, by the time the ambulance arrived, the services confirmed that she had passed on. And then the other person who passed in Gauteng, she got off the taxi and collapsed and died before she could even get to the post office itself. Now, to us it says, we must appreciate and understand that some of our people are going out to get the money, even if they are not in a very good state, because they don't have any other means. These are people who depend entirely on SASSA grants, and sometimes I'm sure they won't even say at home when they are leaving that, well, I'm not feeling very well, because they know that getting the money is about putting bread on the table for the children that they live with in the homes. So SASSA and the department are working around, including the department, the provinces where this has happened. The families have been contacted, and we'll do everything we can to make sure that these grant recipients, the families of the deceased grant recipients, are taken care of. What is a challenge is that for those beneficiaries who did not access their money, nothing can be paid to the families, as the grants being paid now are for April. The regulations confirm that we can only pay grants at the end of the month in which which the beneficiaries dies. These beneficiaries died in March, so are not entitled to the grant for April. However, we do want to say that we need to look at supporting this, and I'm raising this issue because we do not want to find ourselves in a situation when people go there to check with them, or when the media goes there and checks, and then the family says, yeah, but we're not getting our grants. We have regulations, we have to stick to the regulations, but at the same time, we have to be sensitive to the fact that these lives were lost at a very critical time when the families need the money. Gauteng already indicated that today, as we parted with MEC Lisufi, he then immediately left Pretoria to go straight to the family of the one who passed on in Gauteng. And SASSA will provide social relief of distress to support the families. Asupol has offered to assist the families with funeral costs to the value of 50,000 each. Arrangements are underway to link the next of kin of Asupol to take up this generous offer, and we wish to thank them for that. The last message that we would like to communicate to the SASSA grant recipients in particular is that they must really adhere to the national call that has been made. They have to do the best that they can to protect themselves. They have to also avoid agitations. As I was going out there was just so much agitation amongst our communities, and we understand the stress and strain that people are going through. And the last message we would like to pass as SASSA is to say, those who are still out on the streets, those who are still not adhering, if they think that their lives are not important, they must also think about the people around them. But I'm sure that as the message keeps on coming, everybody everywhere in South Africa will really have to assist us in making sure that we assist them. I thank you.
Colleagues, I hope you can hear me. Yes, yeah. Members of the media, just one request that I made with my colleagues, because Minister Zulu has got to go and run and ensure that our elderly and our disabled people are able to get their grants in a manner that she has explained. Now, we would like to release her, but before we do so, we will take a few questions that we would like to direct to her. Maybe let's start by testing. Members of the media, we also want to test whether our system is working, because very soon we would not like to have you here. We would like to have something that will have us here, and we will speak to you from wherever you are, where you link up with us and you ask us questions. Let's start with those that would like to ask questions who are not here. Do we have any?
Not yet, Minister. We don't have any calls.
Thank you. Now, let's then get to the colleagues who are here. I know that you had worked on a system. Now, if your system is too slow, I will just get hands. We are bridging the two systems now. Any colleagues here that would like to ask questions, unless you have sent your questions via WhatsApp? But be that as it may, let's just get started. Yes, colleague, and the other colleague. Any other colleague? There we are. Thank you very much. Can we hear you, sir? Just press there.
Sorry. My name is Nazir Noor Mohammed from Glow TV. My question to the Minister is, how do we deal, is there any protocol that NGOs should follow when giving out hampers in the communities? Police are hassling them. There's NGOs that deliver on a weekly basis, some on a monthly basis, but they're having a real problem giving out hampers.
Thank you very much. The next colleague.
Good afternoon. My name is Jean-Philippe Rémy. I'm a journalist with Le Monde. I'd like to know if we get some indications about when and in which way maybe the payment of different help is going to be made in the context of the Solidarity Fund. If we have indications of the next future when this system might be implemented. Thank you.
Just answer the question that you have to answer, Sis Zulu.
Hello? Hello? Yeah, now it's... But I shouldn't be holding it. Okay, thank you very much. Maybe let me start by thanking you for that question, and maybe you might also give me your details so that I can be able to follow up in terms of the food parcels. I do want to say that we are accrediting those NGOs and NPOs who would wish to support our communities. Remember that the Minister of Kokdam, Minister Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma, passed the regulations, and then we had to develop our own directive. And our own directive had to include what was going to happen in as far as NGOs and other organizations that would like to work with us. I don't have the immediate details now as in terms of who they are supposed to call, because we've just recently signed off the directive. We've just signed off the directive. But you do fall under NPOs and NGOs fall under our directives, which we have concluded, and that should be the guideline of what needs to happen. May I also indicate that in as far as the support to our communities are concerned, we are calling on those NGOs who want or do have something to give to work preferably with the provinces, work preferably with the local structures, because if they are going to be calling us at national level, we must not necessarily have the capacity to be directing them at provincial level. We have been working very well with the MECs in all the provinces. We're working very well with the regional managers of SASSA. So if you could also, they could also find out on their own where they can, find out the numbers for SASSA so that they can call SASSA, but we would have to publicize the details as soon as possible. But we are very looking forward to working with those that want to assist us, because we're very much aware of the stress and strain and the food security that's going to be a problem for us. So we'd like to coordinate so that our people don't go hungry. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm told that there are some questions on WhatsApp. Can we have them? Yeah, just read them. Only those for Minister Zulu.
Yes.
Yes.
The first question is from TD Madia. She's here, but okay. Okay.
Thank you. Sorry about that. TD from News 24. Just two very quick questions for you, Minister. You know, you're speaking a lot about what it's like, what it should be like handling communities. There's been a lot of outrage today. I see the Gauteng Premier has been out and about testing people, and people are saying, but what about the dignity of these people? You know, as a minister who handles this particular portfolio, are you speaking to your counterparts about what they need to do when they're out and about in the public dealing with our people, particularly in our townships? Secondly, there's a question around people with, is there a social relief plan for those who aren't SASSA recipients, however they worked in the informal sector, and now because of the measures that have been taken in the lockdown, they can't work? Are there measures, a plan of sorts to help those people out? Thank you.
Let me answer the last question. Can we leave that question for Minister Kumbuzo, please. The last question. Thank you. You can ask other. Are there any other ones who still need to ask for Minister? Ask Minister Zulu.
Minister, we've got two callers on the line. We've got Ian Boko and Dennis Webster on the line.
Vuyo, can we hear you?
Yes, I can hear you.
Ask your questions.
Minister, what I'd like to understand from EMCA is if those the minister has been working with that assure her that, for example, there's enough money to go around and money will be made available on time. If they had discussed the fact that the assistant should speak to the stated priorities, why then did the money arrive late at many rural points? And why did whatever it is that they had to do not speak to the stated priorities, which the minister says were in fact discussed with the partners? Who takes responsibility for that?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mbogo. The next caller is Mr. Webster.
Dennis Webster.
Dennis Webster. Dennis Webster, ask your question.
Looks like we've lost Dennis, Minister.
Thank you very much. Sorry, Dennis, you have lost your opportunity. Why we're doing this, you will see that we're bridging two systems. This is what we want to get to, where you will be calling us from wherever you will be, having watched on television, either in your home, you then link up with us to ask whatever question you would like to ask. That's what we are moving to. And we can see that the system works. Next time, you will not be here. You will be in your homes or in your offices, but still be able to listen to these briefings and be able to answer questions in the manner that Mvuyo Mvoko has been able to ask. Minister Zulu.
With regard to the first question, I think it's not. Oh, okay. Maybe that will be better. Can you bring it down? No, thank you very much. With regard to the first question about testing, I really don't think I would be the right person to answer that because I have not even, I know that Gauteng has got a plan and they've been doing it, but I really don't want to answer a question where I haven't had a conversation, first and foremost, with the Premier of Gauteng to explain exactly the concern. The only thing I can say, obviously, is that we all are concerned about the dignity of our people. We all are concerned about our communication to our people. We all are concerned about how we treat our people. We all are very concerned at this point in time. And if there's been any sensitivity anywhere, I'm 100% sure that as government we can deal with it, and the government of Gauteng can also be able to deal with it. Right now I can't answer it because I'm not aware of it. Why was the money not available? Why did the money arrive late? Yes, we did indicate yesterday, we were very upfront yesterday, that I think in our calculation, and we take full responsibility, by the way. I can't apportion responsibility to that one on that one. We work together. And one thing I can assure you, myself, the CEO of SASSA, the CEO of NDA, the post office, we are working together. Minister Stella and Ndabeni Abrahams, we are working together long before even the issue of coronavirus came about. We had already agreed that if we are to serve our people properly, we've got to be able to work together and improve our systems. And by yesterday, we were upfront to say that there was, we miscalculated as to the amount of money that was going to end up being withdrawn. And of course, if there was not enough money yesterday, try and imagine what it meant to then get the Reserve Bank, to get the people that work with us to supply the money, to make sure that the money is available. To this point, I'm aware that it was in Mpumalanga where they said no, the money wasn't available, and I left the CEO out there trying to deal with any area where the money wasn't there. But we were assured by those that take the money to the pay points that the money will be available. And if there are areas that still have a problem now, it means one must just go out and deal with that. We take responsibility, all of us. And as a minister, obviously, I have to take responsibility because I've got to make sure that it's properly coordinated. I'm not here to hang anyone out to dry because I have to take responsibility. Okay.
The first question is from Dennis Webster from the New Frame. His question is that he has confirmed reports that over the weekend, the National Command Council on Coronavirus considered increasing the child support grant to offset economic shocks of the lockdown to the most vulnerable. He's asking for the minister to please confirm whether the council has decided to increase the amount of the grant or not, and please explain the decision if it was taken. The second question is from Paul Vigiati from Bloomberg, also to the Minister of Social Development, asking whether the department is considering coordinating with the Department of Health to have coronavirus testing and possibly vaccinations of the most vulnerable at SASSA pay points.
First question, I don't know where that comes from, Dennis Webster, because I don't know, maybe whoever gave him that information, he must go back to that person, for the person to give him the answer, because in our meeting, the meetings where I've sat, I haven't missed a single one of those NCC meetings. So I don't know where that comes from. Maybe, I'll get his number so that I can have the conversation, because I don't mind clarifying things to people. So if he has the number, I can talk to him, but no such decision was taken. Secondly, with regard to consideration of testing at pay points, no discussion has been held with us with health at the moment. But of course, the Minister of Health, together with whoever the Minister of Health is working with, they have the power and the responsibility of deciding if there's going to be testing, where is that going to be done. But so far, there hasn't been any discussion about testing of social grant recipients at pay points. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister Zulu. We now move on. Am I audible? We now move on to Minister Thulas Nxesi to talk to us about workers. Honorable Minister.
Thanks, Minister Mthembu. Ministers, the colleagues from the media and the viewers. My update focuses on firstly on the leave arrangements and the UIF payments. And secondly, I will deal with the issue of the labor inspections, which goes with the third issue of health and safety. On leave arrangements and the UIF payments, inevitably, colleagues, there will be challenges and the need to take remedial action. This is the case in relation to the leave arrangements. As the Department of Employment and Labor, we are receiving concerns from workers and unions that some employers are seeking to shift the burden of the lockdown onto the workers, using their annual leave as the first line of response to the lockdown. We are also getting complaints from workers that their employers have instructed them to take unpaid leave during the lockdown. We do understand that in terms of the leave determination, employers can negotiate with employees to take leave at any time as they deem fit. However, this is a unique situation which requires that all of us to act in a manner that promotes social solidarity. As the department, we have issued a directive explaining the process to be followed and the kind of benefits employees will be entitled to under the employment or the unemployment insurance fund. We have also announced a national disaster COVID-19 benefit that the UIF has put in place as an instrument to mitigate the effects of the layoffs of workers during the lockdown. It is important, though, that all parties understand that the UIF cannot deal with the millions of the individual claims which would just come at the same period. This would lead to delays in the processing of such claims. Rather, we've put in place systems to pay out UIF benefits through the companies, sectoral associations, and bargaining councils, including but not limited to the sectors like tourism, small business enterprise sectors. So we're trying to cover all the sectors. We are in the process of concluding such agreements with the Textile Bargaining Council, which came first. We would also like to mention that the discussions with the travel and tourism sector are also underway. We will be announcing towards the end of the week. We also appeal to all other sectors to agree to this arrangement because it's going to be easy for all. The department has also engaged the Banking Council to facilitate the UIF payments. We think that they have a national infrastructure as the banks. They might be very helpful. And we will provide further details as this process unfolds. Our technical teams are meeting now dealing with these issues. So we are moving away from the traditional model of individual claims through the labor centers, which would be simply overwhelmed. It will also turn the labor centers into the various hubs as they would attract huge crowds. We need to stress that such arrangements for group or collective payments require that we enter into a memorandum of understanding with the employer bodies and the bargaining council that use or that their use of monies will be subject to audit. And we're going to do it with all the sectors. This has led to some resistance from some employers. We all need to understand that these are public funds that by law they have to be audited. We therefore shall insist on the implementation of the proper governance in this regard. None of us have a choice on this matter. I urge all the parties to get together and engage so that we can expedite the payment of these monies to the workers that need them. The UIF staff is available to assist in any way necessary. And to this effect, we have a hotline number to obtain advice on how to access these benefits and to empower employees to assist, to empower the employers to assist their employees. The call center number is 012-337-1997. Let me repeat it, 012-337-1997. It's from 8 o'clock in the morning to 20 hours in the evening. The call center operates from Monday to Friday. We are negotiating within the department the idea of extending this to weekends. And we must emphasize that the relief which the UIF is giving, we are talking about the relief for the month of April, the 21 days which have been pronounced by the president. People should not take advantage of the situation. Employers should have by now paid the March salaries minus the 4 days. People cannot start pressurizing us for the March salaries. We are catering for the 21 days. We would like to express our sincere appreciation to the employers who have already demonstrated social responsibility and solidarity by not only paying the workers in full during this lockdown, but also by making themselves available to assist by acting as disbursing agents during this period. On labor inspections, the issue of the essential workers. Firstly, it appears that some employers who are not delivering essential services and goods are forcing their employees to work. Employers are either unaware or choose to ignore the provisions of the national disaster legislation and regulation, which only provide for essential services and production to continue at this time. In terms of Regulation 11G, this is a criminal offense and puts at risk not only these employees, but all who they are in contact with, and goes against the call for as many of us as possible to stay at home. Any employee who's not involved in a business delivering essential services and goods and who's forced to work is entitled to contact SAPS, the police, and report their employer. Any worker who does this and is subsequently victimized will be protected by the Labor Relations Act, since this will be an unfair labor practice. It's a matter which we will be able to follow it up later. And I further call on employee or employer organizations to intensify their communication to individual employers, informing them of their responsibilities during this period. On health and safety. Secondly, in respect of the workers who are required to work in this period, employers are required to ensure that the Occupational Health and Safety Act is adhered to in respect of the occupational hygiene and provision of personal protective equipment. In response to numerous complaints from the workers that some employers are forcing them to work without the necessary personnel protective equipment, our labor inspectors are following up, particularly at the moment in Gauteng, Western Cape, and KZN. Indeed, a number of retail and manufacturing enterprises have been temporarily closed exactly for these reasons: lack of this protective equipment and failure to ensure social distancing. Our inspectors are being accompanied by SAPS and the Department of Trade and Industry officials. The reason for the latter is that there is evidence of some employers having obtained fraudulent certificates declaring that they can continue to operate as essential services. The labor inspectors report daily to me on their findings. At this stage, we are urging non-compliant employers to do the right thing. If the situation persists, we will start to name and shame individual companies and branches. All this, or at this time in our country and history, let me just remind all of us, as we say, we wash our hands, we practice physical distancing, we stay at home and stay safe. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister Ngesi. We now call upon the Minister of Small and Medium Enterprises, Minister Kumbuzo Chave. Minister.
Thank you, Minister Mtembu. In the last briefing, we announced the responses that are led by the Department of Small Business Development and its agencies to support the SMME sector. Last week, we published qualification criteria for both the SMME debt relief financing scheme and the business growth and resilience facility. We indicated when we were announcing that an online application form will be available from Thursday, the 2nd of April. Telkom Yellow Pages are finalizing the online application so that we don't have challenges we experienced when the database was opened. But in the meantime, the department will proceed to open the applications from the 2nd of April, but it will be manual applications. The application form for the debt relief and the business growth scheme can be downloaded from all our websites, that is the www.dsbd.gov.za, the sifa.org.za, sida.org.za, mabindu.org.za, and the smmesa.gov.za. The completed application forms can be sent to SMME Relief at sifa.org.za and or bizgrowth at sifa.org.za. This is depending on the scheme that is being applied for. We are appealing to the SMMEs not to send the same application form to both email addresses. Send the application form to the applicable email address so that we do not clog the system. We will migrate to the online application as soon as Telkom Yellow Pages are ready for the online application to be activated, because it will do automatic directing to the relevant email addresses. Those who have applied on, who have registered on the SMMESA database and were not issued with the reference numbers, by tomorrow the bulk SMS service will send you your reference number so that you can quote the reference number when you do the application, because one of our requirements is that you must have been registered on the SMMESA database. Last time the question was, what is the turnaround time we're anticipating in terms of the time it will take from application to the time of the disbursement of the funds to the applicant? We are estimating that at worst it should take us between 7 working days, and the operative word is working, 7 working days between the application and your notification for the approval for the application. And it will take us a maximum of 5 working days from approval of application to the disbursement of the money to your account. And this Friday, SIFA will approve the rescheduling of the loan repayments for 6 months to the value of 359 million rands for at least 206 clients of SIFA. they continue to work to assist other clients who will qualify for the rescheduling. On Monday, the 30th of March, the President announced that we are working on support packages for businesses in informal sector. We have finalized the details of a dedicated spaza shop support scheme, and I'll talk to it later. And the date of the opening of applications for the spaza shop support scheme will be announced on the Thursday, the 2nd of April. We are also finalizing the support packages for other fields of the informal sector, including hawkers and certain categories of self-employed who belong in the informal business sector. And this we should be able to announce by Thursday, the 2nd of April. In terms of the dedicated spaza shop support scheme, we've got 5 types of support that we are giving. We're giving the opportunity for networking or purchasing power or bulk buying, and we are coordinating that bulk buying through the pre-selected or selected wholesalers. And they have to buy on a pre-approved basket of goods. And that basket of goods will include some of the produce made by SMMEs that the department and its agencies are supporting, and those other SMMEs who have the certification for their products. And the scheme will also entails access to seed capital and credit facility. We know that some of our spaza shops are not able to access money to buy stock, and we are availing at first go a seed capital to assist spaza shops to buy stock, but that will be followed by a credit facility to enable them to continuously to buy even beyond this situation. And then we are also supporting them in terms of the business management support, because we know there are challenges with our spaza shops in running the businesses to become profitable. That will include things like bookkeeping, customer service skills, inventory management, which is stock control and purchasing and other things, and occupational health and safety and environment. We are also facilitating access to business, to basic business tools, such as instant payment machine, the speed point, airtime, and such vending facilities. And in terms of health and hygiene, we want to support spaza shops to meet the health and the occupational health and safety standards and environment, which are required most critically in this period of need. And there are compliance documents that spaza shops, when they have to apply, they will have to complete. We have availed CEDA to support them, and they can be access that support through their provincial agencies. We're going to provide the numbers from the provincial departments responsible for economic development in provinces, and our CEDA dedicated numbers to support spaza shops. We are going to facilitate the licensing of owner-operated spaza shops in areas where they are not licensed, but this will be in accordance with the law as prescribed. And the CIPC registration, because spaza shops are part of the micro businesses and they must accordingly be registered. SARS registration, because the micro businesses must accordingly be registered. And the UIF registration, so that next time, Minister Ngesi can be the one that sorts out the payment and not ourselves. But we must emphasize the issue that you are registered for SARS. It doesn't mean you have to pay SARS. It means you must file returns for SARS. And we're going to put a bookkeeping support program which will use the unemployed graduate or who have bookkeeping to assist them to do that, because it is important that the revenue system knows how many people are there trading, but also how many cannot afford. It also assists a government with planning. We are also going to assist the spaza shops, those who do not have bank accounts, to access bank accounts, because it's important that we can't give money to individuals. We have to process it in line with the laws of financial management in the country. What is the qualification criteria to access the spaza shop support? The spaza shop must be owner managed and operated, and the spaza shop must be willing to register on the CIPC, SARS, and UIF, as I've indicated, and that there will be dedicated support to assist them with those registration. They must give us, if they claim to have a bank account, they must give us the proof of banking, and they must register on SMME SA, and there is assistance available for that, and we're going to communicate when you communicate the opening date for applications. And spaza shop must hold permit to trade. And for those who are currently operating illegally, they can go to their nearest municipality to apply for the permits. With the assistance of SALGA, they've come to the party, and the municipalities are ready to give permits to operating spaza shops, those who qualify to do business in the country. they must also be willing to stock products manufactured by other South African SMMEs, because it's time that we promote our own, and if this economy has to rejuvenate and self-sustain, we must start to buy what is South African as part of reinvesting in this economy. And they must be willing to submit monthly management accounts after they've been on the system, and CEDA will assist them with that, which is the post-investments. They must be willing to continue with the system of support for at least a minimum of 12 months, so that we can make sure that they are firm businesses and are in good standing orders. What is the current operating environment that we want to make sure happens? We have the responsibility to ensure continued access to household basic necessities without traveling a long distance, in line with observing the instruction of the Commander-in-Chief and the President of the Republic that we must stay home. We also have the responsibility to minimize multiple infections caused by movement of people and unhygiene places. We cannot overemphasize the importance of assuring hygiene in the trading environment of spaza shops. Therefore, part of the requirements we are putting for the spaza shops and the police when they go out there, the spaza shop must have the ability to sanitize before and after serving each client. They must have the ability to disinfect the counters in line with the guidelines of the Department of Health, and they cannot sell poor quality or stale food in their shelves. And there's a need to maintain social distance, both when serving customers, between the trader and the customer, and between the queuing customers on that. Traders are not allowed to use spaza shops as sleeping quarters. Thank you.
Thank you very much, colleagues. We are almost getting there. We now allow Minister Mbalula to speak to us about transport matters and aviation.
Thank you very much, Minister and colleagues and the members of the media. Today, post the address of the President yesterday, we give you an update about issues at aviation, other matters that are related to public transport, in particular taxis. We have had a meeting with the taxi industry up until last night, late last night, on the concerns that they were raising, and we are agreed that tomorrow we will, together with them, address the rollout of the directions tomorrow. Since the announcement of the lockdown by the President and the regulations and directions, the majority of activities slowed down dramatically, with all domestic airlines grounding their passenger flights effective from midnight 26 March 2020. Aviation-related queries thereafter were dominated by the following: 1, foreign nationals and South African citizens requesting repatriation and evacuation; 2, technical flights; 3, foreign crew disembarkation and quarantining; 4, a definition of essential cargo and services. As far as international and domestic passenger flight, as well as evacuation, repatriation, and technical flights are concerned, the transport directives are as follows: all international and domestic passenger flights are still prohibited, irrespective of the risk category of the country of origin, except those flights especially authorized by the Ministry of Transport for the evacuation of South African nationals in foreign countries. With regard to the repatriations of foreign nationals from South Africa back to their respective countries is allowed, provided the following conditions are adhered to. One, foreign countries must charter their aircraft to South Africa without passengers except with the crew. Two, the crew is not allowed to disembark. Evacuations are as follows. The evacuation of South African citizens who desire to come back home is allowed, provided one, he or she has a fully paid return flight ticket. Two, on arrival, they will be subjected to mandatory quarantine for a period of up to 21 days. And three, the crew shall be allowed to disembark subject to mandatory quarantine laws as may be applicable. Now, I need to explain to you that the National Command Council on Coronavirus agreed on this after the Department of Transport together with DERCO have actually made submissions and agreed on this, and the process through the National Joint Operations. And so you will understand that this is based on the implementation of the regulations post the lockdown and the challenges that were faced since then. And part of those challenges involved South Africans who, when the lockdown was implemented, they got stranded in foreign countries on their way back home. And their airlines coming to South Africa were cancelled. Now, you do have South Africans who've got the capacity to repatriate themselves to come back home, or with the support of the airlines to come back home. So this is not a normal operation. South Africans only will be allowed to actually come back home, and not a normal process of airlines coming in and out in the Republic. So the lockdown stand. So we cater for South Africans who want to come back home, who are stranded and assisted by the airlines to come back home. As you will know, that the regulations and the directives post the lockdown are very clear that we don't allow airlines coming from outside to South Africa, either from risk countries or low risk countries. We don't allow it, they are prohibited. We are now making these directives post the implementation of the lockdown in the past 5 or 6 days, given the fact that we have encountered this situation of South Africans who are stranded in foreign countries. So I need to give you that background so that you understand we are not introducing something new. The regulations as regulations that have been passed and agreed upon by the Command Council post-lockdown still stand. We are making these further directives because the regulations allow ministers to make directives in the process of implementation of those regulations. Like we have explained from the onset, that different ministers from different portfolios will be allowed to issue further directives as and when the regulations are implemented. So that is why today I will not deal with public transport, because we have had to deal with the concerns of Santaco and NTA, which we met with, and we have agreed on what needs to be done. And Santaco asked to go back, and I know most of you are interested on that, and will address you about that together with Santaco and NTA tomorrow, because we have had to attend to a whole lot of issues that they were raising with us, and that it took us up to late last night to meet with them in a bilateral discussion and to engage them, and to then arrive at the new directives that we need to issue as the Department of Transport, which we are doing that today. They will be gazetted, and then we'll speak on those directives tomorrow, together with NTA and Santaco, so that we are able to clear the confusion on the ground. And we have arrived at those decisions after consultation also with the Department of Health, which is the primary department that is leading us on these directives. because everything that we do must be informed by the state of health. Are we complying? Are we in line with what the Department of Health want us to do to contain the coronavirus? And that is what we are doing. We have also discussed with the Minister of Police to bring him on board on the new directives so that the police and the law enforcement on the ground, together with the Minister of Defense, are in line to understand if there are new directives, what are the new directives on the ground. So we'll announce those tomorrow, and they will immediately be on implementation once they are gazetted, and they will be gazetted today. So I needed to explain that with regard to evacuation. The following technical flights are allowed. 1, medical evacuation flights. This has been the case since from the inception. 2, aircraft in a state of emergency is allowed. 3, overflights, meaning flights that are passing over and they will need to fill up and so on, they are allowed. And 4, technical landings for refueling. You are going to Zingi, but via OR Tambo, and you run out of fuel, you are allowed to do that only and pass. And no disembarkation is actually allowed. 5, aircraft operations related to humanitarian aid, relief, flights, and other safety-related operations. They are allowed to land at our airports. Medical evacuation flights should not carry passengers except patients and crew. That will, upon landing, shall be subjected to mandatory quarantine laws as may be applicable. Technical landing flights are allowed on condition that no passenger may disembark. The following airports should have standby operational staff who will receive aircraft that are in distress. Port Elizabeth, Bramfisher, Free State, Bloemfontein, 3, Uppington, Kimberley, 4, Polokwane, Limpopo, 5, Kruger, Mpumalanga, in Mpumalanga. Air transportation of all cargo, essential and non-essential, is permitted. Disembarkation of flight cargo crew is permitted on condition that it will be subjected to quarantine laws applicable in South Africa. Now, we are adding all of these new directives given our practical situation on the ground. In terms of the directives that we issued post-lockdown, we only referred to essential cargo in terms of the regulations. Now, in terms of the directives, we're saying all cargo, given the new directive of the National Command, meaning it's not only essential, but all cargo that include essential. And what it means is that the cargo that come in will be sanitized upon disembarkation and all of that, and that is what will happen. So we also cater for crews to disembark from this particular cargo, because some of them travel long distances and coming into South Africa, based on experience, they've made requests and we have acceded to that. So there are specific hotels around the airport that I will not mention that will cater for this operation, because we need medicine in the country, and so that we don't run out of medicine. We need business to continue in terms of cargo and all of that, that must continue. This will also apply in terms of the maritime sea ports in the country. So that will also apply in terms of disembarkation of crew. As we speak, I know there's one that you are interested in, which is the Queen Elizabeth II. We have now finished with the Minister of Health the disembarkation upon issuing the clearance with regard to ISPS code, which is required by the Department of Transport, and we have checked, and the Minister of Health himself is on the ground in Durban, and that has been checked, and all the seafarers on board of the Queen Elizabeth II have been checked and tested, and they are cleared. And they will disembark and they will follow all the regulations in relation to quarantining of those 6 South Africans, and the rest will proceed to where they are going. And that is the situation. And then with regard to public transport, we will clarify all of those issues with you tomorrow. So Jackson Mthembu, our own Minister of Communications, have asked us today to appear before this tribunal to clarify the issue of the media, to keep you updated on matters of aviation, which we've been dealing with together with the Minister of DERCO, but also arising from the Command Council, because we report to the Command Council through the net joints, and the net joints have reported to the Command Council, and the Command Council have given us the orders. So these are the orders that we are implementing post the Command Council and the President's speech last night. I thank you.
Now, my friend, colleagues, I can assure you, we are not before a tribunal. We are before members of the media, but speaking to our people, speaking to the people of South Africa. Under these difficult circumstances, on what are these measures that we are taking to ensure that the lockdown continues, but in a manner that also understands the changing environment. Having said that, I now call upon the Minister of DERCO, the Department of International Relations, Minister Naledi Pandor. Minister.
Thank you very much, Minister, Cabinet colleagues, and ladies and gentlemen of the media, and our DG. I don't know if it's a case of the best to the last or the most troublesome to the end. Well, I think the message from my colleagues is certainly that the most important role that all of us have is to play a part in curtailing the spread of this virus in our population and worldwide. All of us, all over the world, are impacted by COVID-19. And our greatest task is to ensure we protect in particular the most vulnerable amongst us, but most broadly, all who live within our country. International travel restrictions have been implemented as part of social distancing strategies. And many, many countries have rules such as those announced by my colleague, Minister Mbalula. The travel restrictions are accompanied by a set of national strategies in each of the countries that limit people movement through lockdowns such as we're experiencing in order to prevent transmission of COVID-19. What we have found then as the Department of International Relations is that many, many of our citizens are finding themselves stranded in various countries across the world. This includes not just South Africans and South African permanent residents, it also includes tourists and others working on short term in South Africa, so foreign nationals in South Africa as well. We are trying to do whatever is within our means to assist those who find themselves stranded so that they're safe and able to travel back to South Africa. Our missions abroad have for some time been collecting data of South Africans who find themselves unable to return home, particularly given the impact of the regulations that has just been amended by virtue of the new directions Minister Mbalula has announced. The repatriation we are referring to would be of citizens of South Africa, so South African nationals, but of course it would also include members of international organizations who work in South Africa, holders of permanent residence permits who have a right to be domiciled in South Africa. These would form part of the grouping that we would have to give attention to. The most recent data that we have available to us suggests that we may have around 1,471 South Africans stranded in various ways in difficult circumstances in different countries across the world. Of this number, 723 are students, 204 are persons who work or are employed in countries overseas, 224 are tourists, and there are 320 who haven't told us what status they have, but they indicate they wish to return. I'm not sure that we've fully gathered all the data as yet, because these are persons who've approached our missions and whose data we have recorded. We believe there may be many more people in need of assistance who we are not as yet aware of, and I'm sure in the next day or so we will have many more on our database. In order to make it easier for people to contact us, those who are abroad and who need help, we've established a 24-hour command center at the Department of International Relations and Cooperation. The command center contact details are as follows. Telephone numbers, +27 12 351 1754. The second one, +27 12 351 1756. Our email contact details of the command center are cicc1@derco.gov.za and cicc2@derco.gov.za. In terms of assistance that we are contemplating for those who are stranded overseas, I've directed that priority be given to those who are stranded at airports who say they're having to sleep on the floor, they have no means for food, etc. Those who have no funds, no accommodation, the elderly, and those who are infirm. Our missions, wherever possible, will continue to render consular services in the context of the restrictions that all countries have introduced with respect to lockdown or emergency regulations. We will also be negotiating with governments, as they're doing with us, to facilitate the movement of stranded citizens of our country. Given the difficulties associated with travel restrictions, we do appeal to those who can afford to return to do so at their own cost, that they indeed initiate such processes. There are some who have started organizing themselves into groups, and they have approached the department to ensure their safe passage home. Others are students who were in residence, were funded for short-term courses or other programs, and have now been moved out of residence accommodation overseas and have nowhere to go. Some South Africans have indicated to us that they are exploring options such as arranging private charter flights back to South Africa. This, of course, is possible in cooperation with their travel insurance companies, their sponsors, or they can do so in groups utilizing their own funds with other citizens in the country in which they find themselves located. In such cases, we have directed our missions to assist with obtaining flight clearances for chartered flights in the host countries and we assist them to get permission to depart on such flights and get permission from Minister Mbalula for them to travel to South Africa. I would like to emphasize the point made by the Minister of Transport, and that is we are appealing to travel agencies to assist travelers and not to exploit them, because we have been told by travelers who are contacting the command center that they're suddenly being made to buy another ticket when they already are a holder of a ticket to travel. So we are asking that travel agencies be appreciative of the circumstance of urgency in which we find ourselves and not use this for profit making. There are citizens who say they will bring themselves home once the airways are open. We will facilitate logistics and consular services to enable them to travel back safely. For those who are unable to leave the countries in which they're located, we will liaise with their families and friends in South Africa where we do not have the means as government necessarily to contribute or pay for their travel or accommodation. The usual means of transferring funds overseas can be utilized by families, MoneyGram or other means. The use of commercial banks or international electronic funds transfer could be done to assist such individuals. For other South Africans who are not stranded or distressed, we ask them to remain where they are, to reduce movement until the end of the lockdown. I must stress that we are not urging tourists or other travelers to suddenly attempt to get on the commercial airlines and travel to South Africa. This is not the purpose of the directives that Minister Mbalula has indicated. Our intention is to repatriate those who wish or need to return home. It's not to initiate tourism or other forms of travel and work and domicile in South Africa. We also make a special appeal to those who remain where they're located, that they observe all the rules and regulations put in place by the authorities of the countries they're in order to help curb the spread of this COVID-19 virus. I've asked our missions to determine from host countries whether their authorities can give any assistance to foreigners stranded in our country due to the COVID-19 pandemic lockdown, and to give our own nationals assistance in foreign countries as well, for example, by extending visas or issuing other forms of permit to allow citizens who can remain to actually do so. I want to thank all the countries that have up to now provided assistance in this regard, not only through consular services, but those countries that have begun to donate both financially to South Africa as well as with other resources necessary to us fighting the spread of this virus. Our head office is monitoring the calls of all stranded South Africans daily to ensure that we inform them of what our government intends to do. We are aware of the anxiety that the closure of borders caused some embassies in our country. According to the World Health Organization guidelines, countries have an obligation to ensure that the virus doesn't spread across countries. All of us have an obligation to stem the pandemic. Our mission and head office will continue to be in touch with our citizens and to assist in all our citizens being reunited with their families in South Africa. One of the categories that we will probably have to give attention to, which we've not addressed as yet, is the fact of South Africa being a hub for most countries on the African continent. We will have to look at what we do in partnership with countries, particularly in the region of SADC because they have no other landing place except international airports in South Africa. So this is a matter that we will certainly be discussing with our colleagues in the SADC region to see whether there is a way in which we might assist. Our regulations will require all incoming nationals, irrespective of risk category, to undergo screening, testing, and, if necessary, quarantine. We will publish a set of standard operating procedures once we finalize drafting them in order to make sure that we successfully initiate this process of repatriation, both for our own nationals as well as allowing foreigners in South Africa wishing to return to their countries to do so. Thank you very much, Minister Mthembu.
Thank you very much, Minister Pando. Colleagues, we decided to come with all these matters for updates so that we are all on the same page. As you will be aware, many of the matters that colleagues spoke to are matters that emanate from the address of our president last night. So we are then giving update on implementation on these matters that our president has raised. But all of these issues that we are speaking to, they also speak to one thing. How do we continue to save lives of our people from this deadly virus called coronavirus? That's what we are speaking to, so that we don't lose the essence of what we are talking about. The lockdown and all the measures we've taken, including at the aviation space level, measures we're taking to give relief to our workers, measures we are taking to give relief to small and medium enterprises. All these are within the ambit of all of us, protecting our country, protecting our people against this deadly virus. We have seen what damage it has done to other countries. Spain, USA, Germany, France, Italy. We have seen what damage and how many people that this virus has killed throughout the world. Numbers are standing at 38,000 now, deaths as we speak internationally. Having said that, colleagues, we were just bringing the context so that as we deal with all these issues, we must not lose what is this fight that we are waging and against this invisible enemy. Colleagues, it's now your time to ask your questions, and we would like to thank you again because you are a very good partner and ally in our fight against this deadly virus. Colleague. That's it. Then we will also take colleagues who will also call us through the call center. Let's start with SABC.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Criselda Lewis from SABC Television News. Minister Nxesi, I'll start with you. Are you able to give us an indication how many complaints you've received just on you being on the podium speaking about employers asking employees to take leave? Our timelines are flooded with such instances where many South Africans seem to be complaining about being forced to take leave or no work without pay, that there's a lot of that happening. Do you have any idea how many complaints you're investigating at this time? Also with regard to the fake permits that you have. Minister Mbalula, you seem to be very optimistic about the relations that you've, or the talks you've had with the taxi industry. You would know that there was a protest by taxi drivers in Njoli, in the Eastern Cape, in PE today. This is post your discussion last night. Are you satisfied that perhaps this might be able to yield results? And finally, the MSC Orchestra. I understand that there are 3,000 South Africans, or rather individuals that were on the MSC Orchestra, that are being sought at the moment after a case of COVID-19 was confirmed there. I recall that case, and many of those individuals were just screened and let go. Now there is this particular instance that might cause a certain crisis. Are you aware of that? How are you dealing with it? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next colleague.
Hi, Bonga Dulane, EWN. I'll start with you also, Minister Ngles. You said something very interesting earlier on about companies who are have fraudulent essential service permits. I just want to get a clear indication of how, where is that scale of the investigation, and how many permits are we talking about here? We're talking big companies, small companies. Just give us a clear indication exactly what kind of sanctions also. Will they be arrested on the spot? Fines by police? How much? To what extent? Minister of Small Business, Bonga here again. In terms of the what spaza shops need to do exactly on the 2nd of April, can you just give us a short description? What will they need? Will they need to supply everything, ID information when they are, so for that you can authenticate that these people really do own these spaza shops, and also how many people they employ? For you, Minister Pando, maybe also Minister of Transport, who also want to come in here, when you're talking about people who are in distress in other countries or stranded, and you're looking at how if they can't use their own money but they want to come back, are we talking another one situation? Are you looking at maybe you might have another repatriations example? Also, where are those talks or discussions, or if you are having them at all? Thank you very much.
Next colleagues.
Lizzie Gatano, News 24. Minister Pando, just one small question from me. In terms of the 1471 South Africans that have requested to be repatriated, how many are coming from high-risk countries?
Okay, next.
Kyle Cowan from News 24. My question is also for Minister Pando. Minister, ventilators are going to be a very crucial resource in our coming fight against COVID-19. We have strong ties with countries that can produce these ventilators at a very large scale, especially China and India. Are we in discussions with these countries to help us? China has helped the US. Are they at the table yet to maybe help us with some ventilators? And then News 24 reported over the weekend, the representative of a major manufacturer of ventilators in Germany said that Africa is in the back of the line for these ventilators right now. In your discussions with other countries, Minister, with representatives from other countries, is this your sense? Is South Africa going to be helped by these countries, especially those whom we have strong trade relationships with? Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Next.
My name is Nazir Nur Mohammed, Globe TV. To the Minister of Transport, you spoke about border control. We all agree that this is a serious matter, that we should do everything to kill this virus, to stop this virus growing. Would you consider restrictions between provinces, movement between provinces, especially passenger vehicles? To the Minister of Small Business, there's confusion exactly as to what time small business should close, the spaza shops. I know of an incident where someone got arrested for trading at 6 o'clock in the evening. What are the trading times allowed for supermarkets and small businesses?
The back.
Thank you so much. Francis Luagamachata from Progressive Independent News Agency. Minister Ngesi, there's a segment of the job-seeking professionals, and some of which were retrenched in the recent past, and as a result, they are no longer on the UIF, and they are unemployed. So, have your department actually considered this segment of the unemployed professionals?
Yes, sir.
Good morning, good afternoon. My question goes to Minister of Small Business. Minister, can you clarify, please, about the pledges announced by the 1 billion pledges announced by the President from the Rupert family and Oppenheimer? Are they loans or donations? Thank you very much.
To our colleagues who are manning the call center, do we have any questions?
Minister, we've got 3 callers. We've got Vuyo Mboko on the line, followed by Show from NHK TV. The last caller will be Gideon from Cap Blanche. Vuyo is the first one.
Vuyo, take the platform.
Okay, Vuyo Mboko from ENCA. Thank you. To the Minister of Labour, what reasons or excuses are companies giving or refusing to enter into arrangements with your department? And then to the Minister of Transport, you mentioned last week that you were in conversation with the Germans about the repatriation of their nationals. Is it true that they are going to be flown back by African Airways? And if so, who will be footing the bill? And lastly, to the Minister of International Relations, are you able to very quickly take us through some of the latest offers of help from some of the countries that have made them?
The next colleague.
NHK TV show.
Speaking. Yes, it's me. Yes, hello.
Go ahead, sir, we are listening.
Yes, my name is Show Petru from NHK, that I'm public broadcaster. My question is about racial stereotyping and racial profiling. I guess this question is addressed to Minister Mthembu and Madam Minister. It's quite often that when I'm covering events in South Africa, I am a Japanese national, and I'm screened at by many people in the public as Corona, China. What do you think is the best way, you as a government official, to fight against this trend, limited it might be, but from some people, to associate Asian nationals with a certain disease, well, in this case Chinese, to the coronavirus? Secondly, related to that, as I said, I am Japanese, I'm not Chinese, so even if the people shout at me ni hao in Chinese, I don't understand what they're saying. But some people say that it's my fault because I look like them, I have the same physical appearance, I have the same skin color, and how in this country that has a proud fight against apartheid, some people still judge people based on the color of the skin. What is the message that we should give out to this trend? Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. The last caller.
Gideon from Cap Blanche.
Continue, sir.
Go for it, Gideon.
Hi there. Can you hear me?
We can hear you loud and clear.
Thank you, Minister. So my question is with regard to South Africa's passengers who are on the cruise liner Costa de Minosa. They, since my days, stranded on the Mediterranean, were finally allowed to travel to Rome. And they are now in quarantine in a hotel in Rome, and they're in quarantine till the 6th of April. How would they go about finding a way home?
Thank you very much. I will now allow my colleagues to answer, starting with Minister Mbalula.
Thank you very much, Griselda Lewis. We met with the taxi industry yesterday. there were issues that were raised in terms of times that were in the regulations 5 to 9 and also 4 o'clock to afternoon. But also there were issues that were raised in terms of the number of passengers per minibus taxi. Those were the issues that were raised, and we engaged with the taxi industry with a view of resolving all of those concerns. Of course, the taxi industry raised issues related to subsidy of the taxi industry. Now, I want to address this issue. The Department of Transport, when we caught up with this virus, corona, is engaged in the process of looking at the business of taxi industry in the Republic. We were in the process, which we are still in, of engaging with the taxi industry in a huge platform that will lead us to what we call a taxi indaba. But this taxi indaba is not like all the indabas you have heard of. It's about intervening and on the question of the taxi industry in terms of its makeup and business, and at the same time, how can government intervene in terms of subsidy for the taxi industry. These issues are going to cabinet, and these issues will be discussed and are discussed between government and the taxi industry. Among other issues that we are discussing is how to regulate the taxi industry. Minister Nglesi, when he talk about UIF and workers and all of that, you will realize that with regard to the taxi industry, a taxi driver will not be covered with regard to that because the industry is not regulated. They are just driving taxis, getting paid weekly, and then they are paying, their payment and salaries and all of that are not regulated. They are not covered in terms of tax. I know somebody who owns a taxi will say that before I buy a taxi, I'm regulated in the sense that the banks ask for my tax clearance. But that is not regulating the industry in the form of business. And regulating the industry will mean that the industry as a whole is recognized. All issues that are related to what is required for a business that is regulated will be addressed. But over and above that, we do understand why there are those challenges, and this is what we're looking at. And we're looking at the subsidy of the taxi industry. So when we got caught up with the virus and dealing with it at the present moment, you must be cognizant of the fact that the issue of taxi subsidy and its discussion is on the agenda of this government. Now, we cannot, because of the virus, take decisions that will not be sustainable. And then take decisions on our toes about subsidy, which we have not looked at, and at the same time process properly through government. And I'm just raising that particular point to say that one of the issues that have been raised in our discussions are those, including how do we compensate the taxi industry for the loss of money and all of that. We have introduced some with the Minister of Small Businesses in terms of the sphere that she's in charge of CIFA, to say that taxi industry must be covered also in relation to those who are supposed to pay their installments, that at least they be given a reprieve for a period of time, and that include big banks as well. The question before us of subsidy is a matter that is before government and that we're attending to. So in our discussions, we engaged with Santaco, and we engaged with Santaco, and Santaco requested to go back to its constituency. And then that is last night, led by its president, Mr. Tai Bosch. And before I came to this meeting, it looks like things were different. And they raised all issues of time, and how government can come to the party. Now, from the National Command Center, we have reflected on this matter, and we've got the new directives. So those directives will be gazetted, and we'll announce them tomorrow. and we intend to do so having engaged with the taxi industry. So I will not go to town on those today, but all the issues the industry have raised, we have taken into consideration. We also met with NTA, and the NTA also reflected and raised their issues, and then we agreed on what we agreed on, and we will be able to speak on those matters tomorrow with the media with regard to the question that NTA will have raised with us. However, we are concerned that there are, calls for the shutdown after the meeting which the president of Santaco related to me, that when meeting with the structures, they agreed that there must be a shutdown. But I said, okay, and then he came back to me also before I arrived here and briefed me that he had further engaged and that the issue of the shutdown is no longer on the agenda. So our team, my DG, and together with Santaco, we've been talking to them, as we would have been doing between myself, Santaco, and his leadership from last night. So we are engaging on all these issues. And Griselda, I can tell you that I'm quite not only optimistic, but after engaging with the taxi industry, I think there is an understanding that this issue is beyond us. Meaning, we did not, plan to be where we are in terms of the coronavirus. It's beyond us in the sense that the concerns the taxi industry is raising are matters that are on our agenda, that as government we're attending to. We need to attend to the emergency because coronavirus is an emergency. Nobody's making money. We're all running things at a loss. And where we can, we need to intervene to alleviate the situation. So that's what we're doing in talking to the taxi industry in our country. And the majority of them will understand that we are in a precarious situation, that government can't take a decision and within its coffers and say that we've got this money that we can invest in the taxi industry and to address the loss. We don't have that money. And the Treasury itself had to look all over to see where we can get money to get masks, to get gloves, to get sanitizers, to deal with crooks who think that it's a holiday for them to make money and exploit our people. And that is across. So strict regulations had to be introduced in relation to that to deal with the coronavirus, which we did not plan for. It's unlike when you deal with ESCOM, because you envisage where we should be and so on, but coronavirus, nobody planned for that. Well over. So our plans in relation to the subsidy of the taxi industry in the long term are not suspended, but they are delayed in the sense that our talks and engagement and getting government to move faster on this matter is being affected in terms of operation. You must understand that government, as in government, through cabinet, is not suspended. There is cabinet in this country that must still process issues, but there is a special dispensation of the command council led by the president to focus on the coronavirus. And we are processing all these issues in the context of the disaster management regulations that we are responsible for. So the challenges that we've got with the taxi industry and the concerns in the context of the disaster, we are dealing with them. But when I conclude on that point, it must be understood that we don't intend to transport anybody. The transportation that is provided is for emergency, meaning in the morning is for health workers. If for somebody who's working at the supermarket to be transported in the morning and in the afternoon. But public transport, like all other transport, is prohibited. And we want to repeat once more, we don't expect citizens to travel long distances to get groceries and all of that. We, however, acknowledge that most of our people got paid just last week. And that is why we began to see huge movement on the ground, on the queues and all of that. But transport that is there is limited, colleagues. It is for essential workers. We don't expect people to commute on a daily basis. So there will be a loss for the taxi industry in this particular regard. So those are matters that we are dealing with. As we issue new directives, we are listening to them and addressing their concerns. And it is disturbing to get calls like strike, like as if we're not talking. There's no need for a strike. There is no need for a shutdown because we're talking, because this is a crisis. This is a human disaster crisis that is facing a taxi owner, a taxi driver, a commuter, a rich person, a poor person is faced with this disaster. So if you say shut down, close down, this and that, it doesn't work for us as a nation. So we need to come closer to each other and address the concerns that we need to address in terms of the taxi industry. When it comes to MSC and Criselda and the people that were screened and all of that, it's not correct. You must understand we pass regulations, and when you get to the port of entry and give yourself time, the people you meet there is borderline. It is Home Affairs. And then Home Affairs, after it go through people who come into the country, what happens, it surrender people to Port Health. And what Port Health does, which is Minister Mkhize's people, in all ports of entry, is to screen people and all of that. But if you've got a vessel, and then people have been screened and all of that, in terms of our regulations, which we have even tightened more, you are not allowed to disembark. You are basically confined where you are and evacuated. So that's why you have had evacuations and evacuations of citizens from foreign countries, Germany, United States, and some of them are still at sea. And they will be evacuated, and their countries sent aeroplanes to come and fetch them from South Africa and to the countries where they actually come from. And some of them, after we have assisted them to refuel and all of that, they then continue with their journey to where they are going. So that is what has affected South Africans in Italy today, who were on a journey and went to France, and after that, they could not enter France because the regulations said no. And now they are where? Trapped and stranded in Italy. So it's not only South Africans, it is well over that regulations were passed and lockdowns were implemented and so on. It affected citizens, not only our citizens, but citizens across the world. So we've got to work together, but not compromise health as directed by Minister Mkhize. So when you get to a port of entry, you are supposed to be screened and you are supposed to be quarantined. And that is what actually happened. Now, there is an allegation that there are people who came from this MSC. Now, you must understand that our laws are not retrospective. When this MSC left to wherever they were going, which majority were South Africans, and there were no citizens as prescribed by the law then who came from risk countries. Nobody. And nobody on board was actually detected to be suffering from coronavirus. If that happens, the whole ship will have been dealt with in terms of the protocols that we've got. And they followed all the protocols upon returning, having come into South Africa and so on, and they were attended to, and together with the Department of Health, and they were properly processed. So the people who can speak about people who come from this ship and who've got coronavirus is Minister Mkhize, right? As the Minister of Transport, all protocols were followed. And this ship, among others, it is one of the ships who threatened us with litigation through a company called Bowman's Attorneys, which we had to attend to in relation to our regulations. So on our part as transport, all regulations were followed. And on the part of health, all protocols were followed. And the rumor that the people in that ship suffered from coronavirus, we all got it on social media. Because somebody who claimed to be working there then said that certain things did not happen and all of that, which is not true. Now, SAMSA, our agency that is operating there, issued a statement to that effect, which you can go back to that statement and clarify. To this day, we are still dealing with the matter to ensure that all the allegations that are made are actually being followed. But it has not been forthcoming that there was somebody on board of MSC Orchestra who actually suffered from this. Now, coupled with that, which we need to clarify, there is a ship called Queen Mary, which is on dock as we speak, and there is a ship called Queen Elizabeth. Queen Elizabeth has got 6 seafarers, which are South Africans. They've been checked. Minister Mkhize is on site as we speak. And as a Minister of Transport, we had to give clearance in relation to the code of ISPS, which is what we're supposed to do. And then allow those South Africans to disembark, and they've been checked in terms of the protocols of health, and they will be quarantined. Do you understand? They will be quarantined, those 6 people who are off Queen Elizabeth. Queen Mary is still at sea and on dock because it will have to be refueled and go to Italy in terms of its journey. Now, there are allegations that there are people on board of that ship who are not South African, who are suffering from, who have been detected, or it is suspected that they could have contracted the coronavirus. All of that is taken care of, and nobody from Queen Mary is disembarking to come to South Africa. All of them, they are passing through our port, and we're doing what we're supposed to do in terms of our protocols, and nobody is disembarking. So please understand the difference between Queen Mary and Queen Elizabeth. And these 6 South Africans on Queen Elizabeth, when I spoke in the press conference last time, I clarified that they were not allowed to disembark up until the necessary protocols are followed. It is only today that they will actually disembark. I will not speak about stranded people and so on. Minister of DERCO will speak about that. Restrictions province to province. The regulations do not allow you to move from Gauteng and go to Northwest as we speak. Once you get into your small car or a big car and you think that you can drive through and go to Free State, you'll meet law enforcement on the road and you'll be returned. They've got to be permit for that. Now, I know there's been a concern all over the place about if my family or somebody in my family passed away, what happens in terms of travel? That has been catered for. People must produce permit because the regulations, you'll have to provide permit in terms of your travel. But there is one problem because somebody went to court in Mpumalanga and tried to challenge the regulations because their father or family passed away and went to Mpumalanga High Court because they wanted to travel somewhere in the Eastern Cape, if I'm not mistaken. And the High Court dismissed that case in favor of government to say that you don't have to travel. Now it is law that you can't travel to any other province and so on. However, permit will be sought and can be provided if you can produce that you are traveling to your family's funeral and all of that, that you can actually be allowed to have free passage to go, as long as you can provide the details in relation to that. With regard to Germans, is it true that they'll be flown by SAA? Yes, they will be flown by SAA cost, German government, not SAA. Well, what SAA does is to repatriate those citizens from here and fly them to Germany. We don't expect SAA to come back with a flight full of Germans to South Africa. If they do that, they will be in contravention of the regulations. They must come back with an airline empty or if ever they come back with anyone, it should be a South African, like we have stipulated. If they go to Germany and there are South Africans who want to come back, they are allowed to come back on that airline. So those are the only people we cater for. And South Africans, when they arrive here, they will be quarantined, mandatory, quarantined. That is strict. There is no free movement all over the skies. So that has been prohibited, and it is prohibited. So if you decide as a German government to pay SAA to repatriate your citizens, that will be done. Okay? Just like all other countries who will be coming to South Africa to repatriate their citizens to the UK, that it will be done. If there are South Africans in Maldives who are trapped there and who have been contacted, we know that they've got the capacity to come back home, and then and so on, they will be allowed to come back home. We've got the new directives, we have signed them last night, they will be allowed. South Africans in Qatar who want to come back home, Qatar Airways want to bring them home, that will be allowed. But we will not allow anyone who comes from anywhere else in the world to use that space to come to South Africa. They will be prohibited, like it has happened with Air China and all other airlines. So with the lockdown, no airlines are flying all over. They've been grounded, and they've complied with our regulations. That is that. And then carte blanche, South Africans in Rome, I've explained to you. We will deal with that in the context of these new directives, because that ship was ready to get them an airline to bring them to South Africa. We'll process them according to the new directives, but also in terms of the health protocol. So you're not just gonna land at OR Tambo, you are South Africans, you go straight home. It's not possible. You will be quarantined for a period of time to be checked, and then afterwards, all the protocols will be followed. So the directives stand, and with the proviso that we've got to cater for South Africans who are stranded, but also we've got to respond to evacuating citizens from other countries. So siyabadedela bagoduke. Enkosi.
Minister Ntshavheni, I know that you have a teleconference soon. Come and respond to your questions, man. Is this your phone box?
When applications going to be available, we are hoping that we'll announce that the applications are available on the second. But they will need an ID document and a permit from their municipality to trade. Okay. Those who do not have permits from their municipality, they must go to the municipality to apply for permits to trade.
It was off.
Thank you. It doesn't realize. We're saying, maybe it's good that it happened that way. We've got two processes. For South African spaza shops who want to access the support scheme, they must have identification, South African valid identification, and they must also have permits from their municipalities to trade. If they don't have permits, they must go and apply for permits in their municipalities, as I've indicated earlier. Then the related issue, which because I'm leaving, though it's not asked, I want to address, is the issue of permitting. Permitting for spaza shops in South Africa is not based on the nationality of the holder. It's based on if you're a foreign national, the owner must have been lawfully admitted into the Republic and holds a valid passport with a visa issued in terms of the Immigration Act of 2002, authorizing him or her to operate a business, e.g. a business visa, section 11, subsection 6, visitors visa with condition to operate business, a Lesotho special permit or a Zimbabwe special permit with a condition to operate a business. Or B, the owner must hold an asylum seeker permit issued in terms of the Refugees Act of 1998 with a condition to work. Or C, the owner must hold a refugee status issued in terms of the Refugees Act, is the asylum seeking status, or the refugee status issued in terms of the Refugees Act of 1998. Those are the three requirements that you require. 4 requirements. If you are South African, you must have your valid ID. If you are not South African, you must meet the conditions that are set by the Home Affairs. Then there was a question of the closing hours of spaza shops. Spaza shops are, the closing hours is the same closing hours with those of the retail stores or any other grocery stores. There's no distinction. We have been pushing for a distinction, and we are working together with the DTIC to make a distinction to allow spaza shops to operate slightly longer hours, so to allow people to operate. We'll update when that agreement has been reached, and with all the other colleagues who are responsible for that section. Then there was a question about the Rupert's and Oppenheimer families' pledges. We must indicate they are not donations but pledges. Therefore, we are not in the position to respond on behalf of the Rupert's and Oppenheimer families' pledges. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. It's just one question for the Minister of Small Business. The question is that many small businesses are faced with the possibility of collapsing if they can't keep. Sorry, can I just start from scratch? Many small businesses are faced with the possibility of collapsing if they can't keep key staff working from home. Is there a possibility to get them to order and deliver urgently needed IT equipment in order to assist them to have mechanisms to work from home?
Thank you. Together with the Minister Stellanda Beni-Abrahams, we have agreed that small businesses and in the IT space or who want to order IT equipment, they must order the equipment online and get it delivered to their staff member directly, not through themselves. They must make those arrangements. Thank you.
I don't know whether, Babunges, whether you are part of the teleconference economic as well. If you are, come and answer your questions. Leave us, sis.
Thanks, Minister Mtembu. As your department considered the unemployed professionals for the UIF benefit, I must emphasize that, or the answer is no. UIF is for the employed and former employed. It's legal, it's there, it's very clear. That's why, for instance, when there are problems, if the company doesn't issue a certificate of service, we call for the pay slip. And so UIF considered all the retrenched workers in order to cushion them. That's what it's meant for. It's not meant for those who are not in the system. Those who are in the system will be the ones who are employed or who have recently lost their jobs. The numbers of the workers who have been frustrated calling us is a huge number. I don't think we do have now a consolidated figure, but I can tell you that on Friday alone we had received 349, and on Monday we received 234. And these numbers, as people are becoming aware of our call center, are increasing. I don't know the number by today, I mean yesterday and tomorrow, but we are now consolidating those numbers, trying to do that on a daily basis from the different provinces. So we don't have a consolidated number. I must also indicate that only DTI can issue a certificate. No one else can issue a certificate. And the businesses must apply. There's a business portal of the DTIC. So DTIC is the only authority or authorized department to issue certificate of trading if the company is categorized as essential service. Further, the reasons given by the employers not to enter into agreement with Dell, they have not given reasons. We're just speculating thus far. But it seems as if they want to enjoy the easy option of just pushing everything to the workers. So they want to deal with what they have, because internally they have the payroll of the workers, they have everything of the workers. But it appears as if some are saying this it's an administrative burden. It's bureaucratic. Unfortunately, you can't deal with big monies, billions like that. There must be accountability. Some would want to dip in the UIF, but want to neglect the conditions which we're putting in place. It's not going to happen. If those companies do not claim, the workers will look into the option of allowing the workers to come directly to us. But it's going to be an administrative nightmare. But we think that workers should not be punished because of irresponsible employers. It's irresponsible for the employers not to take an option which is cushioning them and cushioning the workers. The applications, we have received 7,000 online claims from individuals. But we are trying to direct those individuals. We note and take all those details. We give them the forms which they have to fill in, but also interact with their companies, because we want now the claims to come through the companies. So these belong to different companies. We've also have 1,520 from the individual companies. So some of the companies are able to deal with the facility which has been given to them. And we expect that once we have finalized agreements with all the different sectors, the numbers are going to go up. Remember, in terms of the UIF, or registered, it's about 1.8 million companies. If that number of the companies, all of them, or let's say 50% of them apply, you know what it means. And the workers they represent, it's a huge number. That's why we have gone for this route of using the different sectors, the different industry associations, and now we are talking to the banks. We think that infrastructure will help us. But let me also emphasize this in Velas. Once again, companies cannot force employees to take the annual leave. Companies must just learn to negotiate. Companies in this sensitive period must try and cooperate. It's a sensitive, frustrating period, we know that. But I think for the good of the country, let's all cooperate. But also, some of those workers who are stranded, it's an indictment on the trade union movement. Because the unions are supposed to be our eyes and ears on the ground. If the leaders of the trade union movement cannot do what SACTU has done, because SACTU came forward negotiated in their sector, and they have a collective agreement at the level of the bargaining chamber. And all the employers, therefore, are cooperating. We expect, therefore, that union leaders should come to the party and do not expect that everything will be done by government. They must help their workers in the different bargaining chambers. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. The first question is from Tamar Khan from the Business Day. She's asking that since babysitters are not classified as essential workers, what then becomes of the children of essential workers such as healthcare providers? The next question was from Tebogo Tshwane from MoneyWeb. He's asking how many companies have fraudulently received certificates as essential workers. May the minister please provide an indication of what sectors they are in and what services they provide. And the last question is from Jolene van Wyk from Media 24. She's asking whether there have been any transgressions from farmers, such as still transporting big loads of farm workers in trucks and not adhering to the social distancing regulations, and whether there have been any complaints from them not having received protective clothing.
The last one, any transactions from the farmers. Most of what we call the vulnerable workers, especially in the farms and in the security industry, they are serious complaints. And remember that those workers are vulnerable because they work in isolation. We have received this. As a result, our inspectors in the different provinces are overstretched, running into some of the farms. And remember, some of them are very far in the outskirts, in the countryside. So those inspectors are overstretched because they also deal with a number of companies in the urban centers. So there are complaints from the farms. It's a matter again which we are looking into, but that is why we are saying we are going to depend on the well-being, on the will of the employers who must cooperate with us. We might try, but we can't be all over. If I'm talking about 1.8, almost 1.8 employers, whether we like it or not, even to go into 500,000 of those employers, it's impossible for us. That's why we call for everybody to be responsible. So we are trying where we are getting the information. As to how many companies with fraudulent certificate, this has been mainly rife in Gauteng and KZN. And I must not lie in the media. We knew of about 3 companies and about 4 in Gauteng, but that information might be coming to us because we've said to our inspectors, they need to compile this data on a daily basis so that we have consolidated numbers. It's mainly retail and manufacturing. Mainly retail and manufacturing. Babysitters, we had not considered this matter. These are some of the issues which are arising we must look into. But in terms of the UIF fund, we don't know when we are talking about other funding and so on. Maybe it's something which we will have to put our heads together as the economic cluster and make recommendations. But at this stage, it belongs to a number of the other issues which had been raised.
Minister Pando, to reply to your questions directed to you. Thank you. You can even speak from them.
Do it from here. Minister. Does it work? Okay. Is it all right from here? Thank you very much. Minister Mbalula answered a lot of the questions that I had marked as belonging to me, so I will try not to traverse the same ground. Let me begin by saying that we don't conceive that this repatriation now allowed by the directives is similar to the Wuhan process. We don't anticipate military health being part of it, a special South African Airways crew, or indeed the SANDF. What we're talking about is a rather different category. It's not after 51 days of lockdown in an epicenter of the pandemic and so on. We're talking of persons who have been, I think, affected by circumstance of the initial directive, where when the travel restriction was announced, they hadn't anticipated that it would be implemented almost immediately, had not made travel arrangements to return. Many of these individuals are persons who should have a ticket in their hand, apart from some of those in distress that I made reference to. So this is not in any way a Wuhan type of process. Should that arise, obviously, we will make the necessary public statements in that regard. There are several of the 1,400 from high-risk countries, and you know those very well. I'm not going to refer to numbers now, but you would know that France was in the list that we'd mentioned, Italy, China, Japan, I think at the time when this was first announced. On the matter of ventilators, I'm not aware at this moment we'd have to approach Minister Mkhize in that regard as to a shortage. I think we've had 3 deaths. I'm not sure how many critical patients there are. I know that preterm babies do require ventilators, so if we have a critical patient and there's a shortage, then there may be a concern. But I know that we are looking at manufacturing companies in South Africa, as other countries have done, to ask, for example, companies that manufacture electrical goods to look at assisting us by focusing on ventilators. And some of you would be aware that some countries are actually, through innovation, looking at reverse engineering and products that might not be necessarily associated with ventilation are now being considered for use for this purpose. So all of that would be part, I would assume, of the consideration that the health department would put into the mix. But it's not really something that we as international relations are working on at the moment. As to Africa at the back of the line, I didn't get that impression when we participated in the virtual meeting of the G20 leaders. I got a sense that there's an awareness that developing countries, and in particular the least developed countries, will have to be given assistance urgently, because you don't want the pandemic to increase. Because what is very clear, as we've been arguing for a long time with respect to Ebola, you might recall, is diseases are global. People may think they are local or national, but they are global in effect, global in impact. And if we don't assist each other, and that's been, I think, statement number 1 from the Director General of the World Health Organization, if we do not collaborate, this problem becomes bigger for all of us. And so I don't think we should marginalize by any means Africa, because we should ensure that we really curb the spread and that we pause this disease. I think even in terms of science and the emerging collaboration we're seeing among scientists, we want this to be a global initiative. We're very pleased that several of the G20 countries have already made commitments to assist the CDC in Addis Ababa, the African Center for Disease Control. We have made our own commitment as South Africa toward that initiative because we have to empower ourselves to be part of international research and innovation initiatives. So I would really argue against a notion of Africa being at the back. We'll be doing so to the detriment of humanity. On offers of help, we have had offers already from Germany. There's a significant commitment already, as well as from China, where it's not just the government of the People's Republic, it is also companies that operate or have operations in South Africa and other parts of the continent. But we are marshalling our own Africa Emergency Fund, as announced by the Bureau of the African Union, which is chaired by President Ramaphosa. And we, as Bureau members, have made commitments, and we anticipate all the African countries will place some resources into that pool so that it grows into a bigger pool that allows Africa, through the African Union, to provide assistance to countries that may need help on the continent. Mr. Cho of NHK, I really wish to apologize for what you say you've experienced in our country. It is embarrassing and it is most regrettable. We have to unlearn this behavior of stereotyping and doing so in a manner that reflects xenophobic attitudes. I think we should not be using the kind of labeling that you referred to, and we need to have public education on this. We've begun to talk much more about stigmatizing around COVID-19 because we're seeing some of that happen. I experienced it myself because Mail and Guardian Online had a false story that I had COVID-19, and I noticed my officials jumping every time they saw me. So I think we've got to teach each other about stopping the stigmatization when we face a problem, a disease of any kind. What we should do is all support each other in terms of the protections that are announced by the state to ensure that all of us exercise due care, that we follow the measures of hygiene that have been announced, and that wherever we are, we observe the strictures that government has spoken to. And this is the public education and public message we should put out there. We will only resolve the challenge of COVID-19 by cooperating and collaborating with each other. And I hope that South Africa, which is a country that upholds non-racialism, non-sexism, and equality, will be a country that reflects the best values in the world, and we won't have a repetition of the experience, Mr. Shao, that you said you had. With respect to the passengers in quarantine in Rome, Minister Mbalula spoke to that, but let me just add by saying, really, when you are safe and being cared for, it is better to remain in a safe condition. Because movement, and we're trying to reduce movement, movement adds to the potential for infection of yourself or for you if you are affected, you infecting others. So when you are in quarantine, please respect the rules that are in place because your safety assures the safety of others. Thank you very much, Minister Mtembu.
Thank you, Minister. You really have represented all of us as you were answering the question by the colleague from Japan. Colleagues, I know that there is a few questions. We have a question online. Yes.
Minister Mtembu, we've got Vuyombok again from ENCA.
Vuyambogo, are you the only person who used this platform?
Well, a quick one from me, just a follow-up to the question I asked the minister, which she responded to. The nature of the offers from China and Germany, is it for equipment, money, expertise, medicine? What exactly are we talking about?
Largely it is equipment that we are receiving offers for. It is equipment, Vuyo, I hope you can hear me. And it is mainly personal protective equipment as well as face masks, and then some other goods that are required with respect to protecting both individuals as well as health workers insofar as management of the pandemic is concerned.
Thank you, Minister. Do you have any questions there, Sisi?
Yes, Minister. There is one from Sophie Mokwena of the SABC. She's asking whether South Africa is participating in any international vaccine trials and whether the panel can share information on what government is doing to help South African citizens, or that has been answered, who are abroad and want to come home. The other question is from, I can't pronounce the name, it's from an independent journalist from Brazil who's asking that, or is stating that there are currently apparently 500 Brazilian tourists here in South Africa waiting for an opportunity to fly back home. When will LATAM be able to operate the next flight from Johannesburg to Sao Paulo? There is only one flight scheduled for tomorrow, but they are still waiting for the authorization from South African government.
Who takes it?
I'm sure with respect to authorization, Minister Mbalula's office will be dealing with that. He has been excellent in terms of prioritizing when we approach his office. And so I'm sure we would be able to make sure that our comrades from Brazil get home safely. With respect to the vaccines trial, again, I prefer that this question be put to Minister Mkhize as the Minister of Health. There are trials in which South Africans are participating. I believe these are novel drugs, or there may be drugs currently in use, or that have been authorized in other countries as suitable for addressing COVID-19 or aspects of the symptoms of this disease. But it is the Department of Health that will be able to provide the full information. And as in science and technology, I could pronounce all those names, I no longer can. I saw them in a list recently, so I think Minister Mkhize must speak to them. But there is some work being done. Thank you.
Minister Mbalula? Oh, covered. There was one question. Let's hear the question from the call center.
We've got one more question from Peter at the Daily Beverage.
Peter, you can speak.
Hello? Peter, you can send your question. Please close your radio or TV.
This is Peter Fabricius from Daily Maverick. There's two questions, if I may. One is to Minister Mbalula. To ask that many of the embassies that are arranging these evacuation flights are very concerned about the conditions under which their citizens will have to get to the airport. That they're finding these rather onerous because they're being asked to gather people together and take them by bus, and that could, of course, spread the virus. And then just another question to Minister Pandor. I think you were asked this, but just to be specific, you said South Africa is prepared to help evacuate some of the nationals, our compatriots in distress. Do you mean by evacuation flights for them, or what other measures? I mean, in other words, what is the program for evacuation flights specifically? Thank you.
Before we answer these questions, let's take the last round now here so that we can also go home. Take the gentleman there, up there, and the gentleman. So there are only two heads. Thank you very much for all. Okay, there is a third head, no problem.
taxis will only ferry essential workers, not the public. And this, I find it to be in contradiction with your answer when I asked this question about those citizens staying in remote areas and might be wanting to go buy essentials far away from where they're staying, when you answered that they will be accommodated in these minibus taxis. Can you please clear that?
The next colleague.
It's again Nazir Nur Mohammed from Glow TV. I just want to know if government took a decision or reconsidered the sale of cigarettes to the public.
You want cigarettes? Okay. Next.
Thank you. It's CD again from News 24. Just two very quick ones. Minister Mbalula, I think we spoke over the weekend about the issue around the UK. People were stranded here, the citizens were stranded here, and there was an issue around whether or not the crews can disembark. And I see that SAA is assisting Germany. Has a deal been reached? Has a solution been reached for the UK citizens? How are they going back home? Because they were stuck over the issue of whether the crew can disembark or not. And then quickly, Minister Naledi Pandor, you know, there's a lot of talk about how Africa is working together with regards to tracking and tracing cases in South Africa. Obviously, some people over the weeks have moved either in and out of the continent as well. Are there conversations, are there plans in assisting each other in terms of tracking whether or not people who might have been infected in Joburg are now maybe in Eswatini, along those lines? What are the conversations and plans around that? Thank you.
Those are the last questions, colleagues, and thank you very much. I now hand over to my colleagues.
I think with respect to the matter of evacuation, it might be flights. I just want to go back to the point I made earlier. There was an unintended consequence when the initial regulations on air transport were published. Persons who had been booked or were about to travel, all airlines stopped their flights from taking off. So there are persons overseas who have tickets, who can or should be accommodated on a commercial airline, which will now have to seek permission and through a passenger manifest assure us that the persons who are on board are South Africans returning from that specific country. That is the process that we are referring to. So the evacuation, if any, will be of persons who are entirely stranded, who do not have the means. For example, a student who had perhaps gone for a short-term course or a one-year course or part-time work and now finds themselves without means. The company that had hired them has closed down. They're totally without any form of support. That kind of person, should there be an international flight or indeed a South African Airways one that is able to bring them back home, we should provide support for them to return home. If they are in need of accommodation, as some indicate they are, within our limited means, we will try to assist in very difficult circumstances. But we're not saying that the government has the means to assume all responsibility. We don't. And we are talking of persons, many of whom are tourists, who do have bookings. We're saying travel agents, please allow them to rebook a return once the flights announce, the airlines rather, announce that they're now ready to apply to South Africa in the manner Minister Mbalula has set out, so that those arrangements can be confirmed and people can indeed return home. On the UK citizens, we have sent out a note verbal to all the missions located in South Africa. As I said, we're going to publish a set of standard operating procedures. One of the ways, in order to assure that we don't create an untenable situation, one of the requirements is the embassy should indicate, we want your assistance in repatriating our nationals from South Africa. Otherwise, we may very well have a situation where there are persons moving from area to area in South Africa who came into the country with an infection or who become infected as they move around. And this is why we want a modicum of control of the process, with the leadership of the missions playing a role of facilitation. Because if you just leave it loose, it will be intolerable for our country. With respect to the continent, we have agreed that the core repository is the Center for Disease Control, located in Addis Ababa, and that it must liaise with all centers for disease control in different parts of the continent. There are countries that don't have such centers. In the SADC region, those that don't would often make use of NICD in South Africa. So we are encouraging certainly depositing of the data with the Addis CDC, the African one, as well as collation on a regular basis of the picture as we see it on the African continent. I do know that the World Health Organization is speaking to each of the leaders of the continent in order to ensure that we are working not just continentally but globally as well.
Minister Ngolo.
1, 2. 1, 2. Yes. On the issue of citizens, let me just, explain again that the lockdown does not encourage movement of people between provinces and also within a province or within a city or a township where you stay. We only allow limited transport for purposes of essential workers. Now, I've heard people raising the issue that we should allow people and what will happen to people after they've been dropped by taxi or transport early in the morning, because shops are opening, at 9 o'clock. And we're allowing transport between between 5 o'clock and 9 o'clock. And we're saying that transport is limited because we cater for essential. But if you go and you want to go and buy and all of that, we have adjusted our directives at the present moment, which we'll announce tomorrow after we have concluded with the taxi industry and we have gazetted at the present moment. But transport is not for movement of people. Yes, where people want to buy, they can do that if they are at a distance and so on. We are encouraging people to buy in their neighborhood, not to travel between Alexander and Soweto. That will happen after the lockdown. We seek to contain the virus, and that is what is happening here. If you are in Alexander, buy in Alexander. If you are in Soweto, buy in Soweto. If you are in Zingi, buy in Zingi.
Where is Zingi?
If you are in Butsabelo, buy in Butsabelo, And that is what, because in every section in Butsabelo or in Mamelodi, there is a shop there is a spaza shop where you can buy food and so on. We don't encourage, and it's not going to be possible where you can travel, you want to buy clothes and so on. In this period, that is not possible. The only thing you can access is food, and food supply is galore. And that is why you've got, many transport caravans that are operational in this period to assist and to be in a position to provide food in the areas where people stay. So we don't encourage movement of people, and unnecessary movement is the lockdown. So you stay where you are, and then you don't commute. Where commuting is allowed in the morning, you can go. We will announce new directives tomorrow in terms of public transport and how we are going to cater for citizens. With regard to UK citizens and how are they going to travel and so on, that will be catered for in terms of the new regulations and the directives to enable UK citizens to travel to back home, but not allowing UK citizens coming into South Africa. So that is prohibited. Now, governments have been approaching South Africa through DERCO, and DERCO through the protocols, which will confuse you. Note verbal, and then I must explain to you what is NOTAM. Now, NOTAM is a notice that we give to all allies to say that from this date, don't come to us. And then note verbal is what Minister of DERCO will have to deal with in terms of protocols for the citizens of that country in South Africa. There are also protocols that are followed here in the Republic. What you must understand is that we are ready to evacuate. That is in terms of the new directives. We are ready to evacuate citizens from wherever in the country and to go back to their own countries. The same as ourselves. We will be assisted to get our citizens who are stranded in other countries to come back home. So that is what we are ready to do now. We have issued new directives, but that does not allow free movement again of airlines over and again coming in and out of South Africa. It's only for that purpose that you've got your citizens here, and therefore we will be ready to release them to come back to South Africa. So those are the things that we are processing that will be done by our operatives on the ground, and they will actually be implemented. So UK citizens in South Africa, we are happy to get them and assist them to go back to UK. And that is what we'll be doing going forward, and with all other citizens from all other countries who have made requests to South Africa that please, we are ready to evacuate our citizens back to our different countries. Thank you, Minister.
Colleagues, speaking of directives, let's just give one last directive. All our press briefings from now onwards will be, what is the terminology? Virtual. So we'll be communicating with you where you are. You will not have to come here for very obvious reasons, so that we remain here, we don't get sick, we don't infect you, you don't infect us. And we will continue to have these briefings in this virtual manner. We will have some on Thursday, where our colleagues from the economic cluster will speak to you. And of course, you will be appraised of when are we going to have others. But we will continue updating you, because through you, we are able to speak to our people. We appreciate your partnership, because in this, we need to work together to fight this disease. We need to be in unison in our efforts and in our response against this deadly disease. And what we have seen up to now is that we are together with the media. We are together with many people in our country, many millions of South African citizens, but even people who are in leadership positions in our churches, in our traditional leadership, in our sports and arts fraternity, indeed in our traditional leadership. We have many of our people who are saying we must work together to fight this disease, because if we don't, I shudder to think what will happen. We therefore need to work together. So far, we are doing well working together. Let's once again ask our people to stay at home, ask our people to observe physical distancing. It was called social distancing. There's a new terminology now. Physical distancing, let's be 1 meter from one another. But let's continue again to wash our hands so that we don't infect ourselves through the virus that we can pick up from any object. We therefore, with these words, declare this meeting adjourned until next time we meet through the visual means. Thank you very much.
It's in Limpopo.
Where is this place of
It's in
yours?
Limpopo.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, it's in Limpopo.
Thank you, bro.
Okay.